It's February 2017 and I'm in Malta. I contacted the Maltese Tourism Board before I left and they've put together a great 3-day itinerary for me. My first full day in Malta was a Sunday, and so the first thing on the agenda was a visit to the small fishing village of Marsa. You can see the colourful fishing boats floating there in the harbour, and also some people here just about to repair the nets. This is an active fishing village, but also one that is struggling to cope with the EU fishing rules. These rules have devastated many fishing communities throughout the EU, and Malta is no exception. To counter this, it has developed a weekly market held on a Sunday, and here you can buy fresh fish and also local produce such as fruits and vegetables. This has helped sustain the community and also attracts tourism, so you can also find souvenir stands at the Marsa market. After leaving the market, we head towards the archaeological sites of Hagar Kim and Mdina. Now, I do take some time here to apologise for my pronunciation. Some of the place names in Malta are pretty hard to say out loud, so no doubt I'll be getting them wrong throughout this video. The Megalithic Temples of Hagar Kim and Mdina are the best preserved and most evocative of Malta's prehistoric sites. As you can see, the temples are currently protected by these dome-like structures. This is to prevent the rocks from weathering any further. These temples are old. They're really old. In fact, they're amongst the oldest freestanding stone structures in the world. The current dating puts them at about 3500 BC. I've always had a fascination with ancient sites such as this, and I've been fortunate to have visited many around the world. Whether it's in Bolivia, Peru, Easter Island, or here in Malta, the same questions raise themselves. Who built these structures? What was their purpose? And how did they move the rocks around? It is currently thought that Hagar Kim and Mdina temples were some sort of oracle centre. You may notice that there are stone blocks with circles cut through them. It is thought that an oracle would have stood on one side and a devotee the other. Perhaps people made pilgrimages to the temples in order to receive a prophecy. As with every megalithic temple around the world though, no one really knows for sure why Hagar Kim and Mdina were made. All that we can really do is give our best guess. I choose to believe that our ancient ancestors were far more intelligent and creative than we give them credit for. Even if you aren't a huge history and archaeology fan, I still strongly suggest visiting the temples of Hagar Kim and Mdina. Allow for between 1 and 3 hours, and also spend some time in the small on-site museum which interprets some of the findings they found when excavating the area. After leaving the archaeological sites, we moved on to lunch, and we had this at a place called Diyar il-Baniyat. You can find out more details in the blog post in the comment section below. After leaving the restaurant, we headed towards the walled city of Mdina. This citadel was fortified from as long ago as 1000 BC, when the Phoenicians built a protective wall and called their settlement Malit, meaning place of shelter. The Romans built a large town here and called it Melita, and its present name comes from when the Arabs arrived in the 9th century. Mdina is Arabic for walled city. They built strong walls and dug a deep moat between Mdina and its surrounding suburbs. In medieval times, Mdina was known as the noble city. It was the favoured residence of the Maltese aristocracy and the seat of the governing council. The Knights of St John, who were largely a sea-based force, made Grand Harbour and Valletta their centre of activity, and so Mdina sank into the background. Today, with its massive walls and peaceful shady streets, it is often referred to as the Silent City, a nickname that becomes appropriate after dark. When we left Mdina, we headed back towards Valletta. During our visit to Malta, it was carnival season, and we managed to catch this procession before it headed down the road. As you can see, there are plenty of colourful floats and people dressed up. This was actually a staging area before the main procession began through the town. The figures on the float seem to be an eclectic mix of characters from mythology and even from horror films. I'm fairly certain I saw Ganesh the Hindu god, but I also saw Chucky as well. I have no idea what any of it means or the significance to it. I do know that back in the medieval ages, the Knights of St John took part in fiesta and carnival events, so it must be connected to that in some way. Today it just seems to be a way for the locals to relax and unwind, although these streets are not exactly relaxing. They're packed at the best of times and it was very difficult to move. Still, I got some good advantage points and managed to take these camera shots. We spent the rest of the evening enjoying the carnival, walking around Valletta and then having a meal. After that, it was time to go back to the hotel because we needed a reasonably early night. The following day, we had to be up early because we were heading over to Gozo. On the second day, we went over to the island of Gozo. Here, I had arranged a bicycle tour of the island. The tour itself only lasted for 2 or 3 hours, but it was enough to get a good taste of what the island was all about. Gozo is smaller and more rural than the main island of Malta. Life seems to move at a more leisurely pace. This makes it ideal for cycling. As you can see from these clips, there is very little traffic on the road. We also followed a route which took us through the quieter streets and lanes of some of the villages. Now I should say here that if you have followed my YouTube channel for any time, you will know that I'm into pretty hardcore cycling. I've cycled from Alaska to Argentina, England to South Africa, Greece to England, and a number of other smaller tours. But don't worry, anyone with even a moderate level of fitness can enjoy a cycling tour of Gozo. As I said, to get around the entire island would take you a maximum of 5 or 6 hours, and you can easily see the main highlights in just 2 or 3. Throughout Europe, there are many different cycle paths which have been developed as part of the European project. In Malta, there are 3 such routes. You can find the signposts for these on the side of the road and they have a pink sign. On Gozo, there is just the one route and this basically takes you all the way around the island. As you can see, when I visited, it was slightly overcast. Basically, I just wore regular clothes which were jeans, my shoes and a jacket to go cycling. However, most people would choose to go cycling in the summer. With this being the case and my experience of Mediterranean countries, I would strongly suggest taking a hat, sunglasses, sunblock and plenty of water. This way you're going to make the most of your tour around the island. As well as cycling along quiet rural lanes, we also cycled along the coastline. As you can see, the views were absolutely spectacular. I strongly recommend cycling for anyone that's intending to visit Gozo, and I would just like to take this opportunity to thank On Two Wheels for loaning me the bike. I've put details of their company in the description below. With the bicycle tour over, it was time for a spot of lunch and then on to some more sightseeing. Here you can see the citadel of Victoria. Victoria is the capital city of Gozo. The citadel has been at the centre of activity on the island since Neolithic times and was probably fortified during the Bronze Age. It was later developed by the Phoenicians and in Roman times it was part of an acropolis. Gozo was also a privileged Roman municipality, independent of Malta, and the citadel was a centre of its administrative as well as its military and religious life. An important temple to the goddess Juno stood where the cathedral now stands. Walking around the walls gives a great idea as to the scale of the complex. It also provides some great views over the cathedral, the square, and also the surrounding countryside. Because of the bike tour earlier on during the day, I perhaps didn't spend as long enough in Victoria as I should have done. I would suggest that 2 to 3 hours is enough time to see all the sights and thoroughly soak up the vibes of the town. After leaving the citadel, we headed towards the Azure Eye. The Azure Eye is perhaps Gozo's most notable landmark. Unfortunately, several days after I took this video footage, the arch was totally destroyed in a storm. In fact, this may be some of the last video footage ever taken of Gozo's Azure Eye. Our last destination for the day was the ancient site of Gigantia. This is a temple complex thought to date back to 3600 BC. It is arguably one of the oldest freestanding structures in the world and predates the pyramids and Stonehenge by several hundred years. Visiting here raised all the normal questions, such as how did they move the stones around, what was the society like behind its construction, and why was it built in the first place? The current theory is that this was a temple complex, but of course nobody really knows for sure. We spent about half an hour here, but I suggest an hour to an hour and a half would be more suitable. When we left the temples, we headed back onto the ferry and over to the island of Malta, where we again had another meal, enjoyed the end of the carnival and prepared for the following day. So, on to day 3 of our sightseeing tour in Malta. We started off in Valletta in the morning and went to Birgu in the afternoon. In the morning, we first began by visiting the Casa Rocca Piccola. This was first built in 1580 in an era which the Knights of St John, having successfully fought off the invading Turks in 1565, decided to build a prestigious city to rival other European capitals such as Paris and Venice. Palaces were designed for prestige and the aesthetic beauty in most of Valletta's streets, and bastion walls fortified the new 16th century city. Casa Rocca Piccola was one of 2 houses built in Valletta by Admiral Don Pietro La Rocca. It is referenced in maps of the time as La Casa con Giardino, meaning the house with the garden, as normally houses in Valletta were not allowed gardens. Changes were made in the late 18th century to divide the house into 2 smaller houses. Further changes were made in 1918, and before the Second World War an air raid shelter was added. The Casa Rocca Piccola family shelter is the second air raid shelter to be dug in Malta. Of the nobility who still own palaces or houses in Malta, few open them to the general public. The Casa Rocca Piccola was one of the first. We were given a guided tour around the house into the various rooms. Many of the paintings and some of the furniture dates back hundreds of years. As with some of the stately homes in the UK, I was led to believe that the family still lives in parts of the house. I'm not sure if they actually live in the parts that we visited or if there is a separate area that was cordoned off from the general public. There were many different collections on display, and one of the most interesting was a collection of silver surgical instruments used by the Knights of St. John. Other parts of the collection included Maltese furniture and other silver, the well-decorated dining room, and also the underground bomb shelters. I've not included footage of the bomb shelters on this video as it didn't really show up too well in the lights. On leaving the casa, we then wandered across the main square where we stopped for coffee, which I highly recommend by the way, and headed towards St. John's Cathedral. The cathedral was built between 1572 and 1577, and it is one of the more elaborate cathedrals I've ever seen. It's decorated in a Baroque style inside and is often cited as one of the finest examples of high Baroque architecture in Europe. Whilst I do think that the entrance fee of €10 is a bit steep, it is certainly worth the money, so I strongly suggest if you visit Malta and Valletta that you pay the cathedral a visit. In addition to the ornate decoration of the interior of the cathedral, there are also a number of notable works of art. One in particular is the beheading of St. John the Baptist by Caravaggio. Unfortunately, video and camera footage was not allowed in this section, so I can't show it on this video. On leaving the cathedral, we walked over to the walls where we enjoyed a view over Grand Harbour. As you can see, the view is pretty spectacular and you can see the fortifications of the various different areas of Valletta. We then went down to the water where we got on a small boat and then went across the harbour enjoying views of both Valletta and Birgu. And this is where this video is going to end. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you'd like to find out more about Malta, please visit my website at www.davestravelpages.com. If you like the video, please thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers for now.